Yes.
All right. Hello, everyone who joined us. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Ms. Fatma Hussein. I will be introducing Dr. Durdona Pulatova. So Dr. Durdona teaches at Tashkent State Pedagogical University in Uzbekistan. She's been teaching as an EMI, ESP, and EFL facilitator with a certified CELTA certificate. She has done her research work in pedagogical aspect of corpus-based activities and created corpora for ESP students. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Durdona.
Good afternoon one more time. Thank you very much for giving chance to deliver this lecture. My presentation topic is about developing professional communicative competence with the word wall. I guess most of the EFL and then ESP teachers know that word wall. Today I'm going to give the brief information about the functions of the word wall and how can we develop our communicative competence in a professional way with the help of the word wall. I am Dr. Durdona Pulatova. I work at Tashkent State Pedagogical University. This university is in Uzbekistan. In my lecture, I am going to explain, and then I am going to discuss the first one, communicative competence components, and then professional communicative competences, and then how can we design the vocabulary-based online games on word wall. I would like to ask some questions before starting my presentation. How many components are there in communicative competences? Who can answer? Hello? Is there any volunteer to answer to this question for components? Thank you, Mariam. Okay, what are they? What are they? Cooperative competences. And do you know that other components of communicative competences? Communicative. Reading, listening, reading, writing, communicative strategy. Yes. Well, yes, you are right. In some sources, it was written that for some sources, it was written like a 5 communicative competences. Well, discursive, lingual, strategic, and then situational. Farshid, am I right? Yes, you are right. There are 4 components of communicative competence. They are linguistic competence, or the second is social linguistic competence. Third one is discourse competence, and then next, the last one is strategic competence. In some cases, it was given as a grammatical competence. We can see that grammatical competence instead of the linguistic competence. Actual linguistic competence, yes, you are right, and then discursive inga, right, you are right. In some cases, it was as the grammatical competence instead of the linguistic competence. Actual linguistic competence is divided into 2 parts. The first one is a competence, second one is the vocabulary-based competence or the lexical competence. Today, I am going to highlight the importance of the linguistic competence in developing professional communicative competence. As we know that most of us that teach English, that MI or that ESP or that EFL to our students. most of the cases our students should know, should have the linguistic competence. It means they have to know that grammar well, and then they have to know how to use the words in an appropriate way. Grammatical or the linguistic competence is understood as a knowledge of the grammatical elements of the language and an ability to use them in speech. What do you think? How can we develop our students' communicative competence? How can you develop your students' communicative competence during the lesson? Should I question one more time? How can we develop our students' communicative competence during the lesson? I cannot see. Is there any kind of the way, that methods or that approach to develop our students' communicative competence? Yes, you're right, Nasir. They interact in a groups and in pairs, right? Cooperative rather than teachers, right? Speaking activities, right? Benchmark to encourage them, get engaged, right? Create a good report at the beginning of the class, right? Elicitation. How many of you teach ESP? English for specific purposes. Yusuf, that mentioned here by engaging them in authentic learning situations, right? You're right. Well, Dr. Nirman Muhammad, and then Ahmed. Ahmed, do you teach ESP? Verbal communications, non-verbal communications, and written communications, right? It's also to teach the ESP business terms, right? Well, that I would like to ask a question, how do you teach terminology? Dr. Nirman teaches that aviation English well, and the legal English, talk time, clear purpose of the sharing, encouraging them to be interact with their peers without fear of the committing mistakes. Well, so how do you deliver a lesson to ESP students? I mean, how do you teach them terminology? Constant communication, mostly doctors, well, on the skill of the system. Well, if your students level, is like a A2 or B1, or that sometimes that your students level that can be that A1 plus, how do you teach them terminology? Do you think it's important to teach terminology? Why should we teach terminology to ESP students? Context is crucial, yes. Why should we teach terminology? Mariam uses pictures while explaining the vocabulary, while teaching vocabulary, and met articles. Well, if your student's level is lower than B intermediate or the B1, how do you teach terminology? And then why should we teach terminology? Meaningful reading comprehension passages to teach them terms. Always need to have good results. Clear classes, right? Using images, right? Connection with reality, well. Fox's instruction. Yusuf, could you clarify what kind of Fox's instruction do you use? uses stories. What kind of story do you use while teaching terminology? Well, that working on projects. I teach them common words, not terminology. Well, it means, Safia, that we shouldn't teach terminology, right? If our students are lower than B1. Yes, okay, well. The next question, why should we teach? Why should we teach terminology? Short stories fun? No, why? Meaning, pronunciation, and then forms. Some of them considered and below words. Usage is much better. Well, short stories. Why should we teach terminology? Reason in the aviation context, to understand well the topic or the context, right? And what about the next reason, or the second reason of teaching terminology? If your students do not know some terminology in their fields, do you think they can communicate with the others? I mean, other professional students. I mean that their students are, can they understand professional tech? Yes, in order to master their specialization, preparing for the next stage, equip them in order to express themselves, to be aware of English language, right? To make themselves clear, communicate faster. Okay, Dr. Nirman, could you explain what kind of communication you mean?
Hello. Hello.
What kind of opportunity that
Yeah, I mean, making themselves clear while communicating over radio telephony. If the pilot is an international one or in the native speaker and he wants to communicate a specific message with the controller, so they should use plain English together with phraseology or terminology.
Thank you.
Okay.
Language. Okay, well, if they don't know that terminology, what will happen? Your ESP teach that if your that ESP students do not know terminology, to specialize the words, what will happen? Can they communicate? They cannot communicate. Will not able to communicate. Well, they're just functions without vocabulary and communication skills, right? Susan, right? That Susan mentioned here that if the ESP students do not know the terminology, they cannot perform their job functions without vocabulary and then communication skills, right? You are right. Miscommunication, misunderstanding. Correct comprehension, yes. And then improving that misunderstanding, improving learners' language proficiency. They are important for their future career, right? Yes, you are right. The teaching terminology gives opportunity for ESP students to improve their future career or to understand specialized text in their field. Misusing that vocabulary, right? How can we develop professional communicative competence? I mean, how can we teach? The name of the concept, students cannot understand the basement, so they are not able to communicate in a proper way in their work. I mean, in their workplace, they cannot understand the concept, right? Do you have other options? We can make students engage in their life situation by integrating technology to our teaching, right? By giving them meaningful, authentic materials that are related to future career, right? So I guess we teach ESP, we need to help learners with the correct pronunciation, correction, understanding of difference in the use of the same words in a different context, using meaningful activities and gamifications. Right, yes. We should keep students engaged in a using language, right? Students need to develop a register that will help them in their fields. So how can you teach terminology in order to develop your students' professional communicative competence? As you mentioned it, and as I mentioned, the vocabulary, knowing the terminology, the most crucial thing in teaching and then in learning the process. So in order to teach some terminology, sometimes some educational tools help us, right? Students need to develop the register that will help them in their fields. Model it so students understand how to use particular terminology, right? Project-based learning, cooperative learning, using pictures, illustration, teach in the context story, right? Argon must be introduced in the context. You mean the jargon, right? Well, visual materials, right? So today, have you ever used a word wall in order to teach terminology? Yes. In which area? Gulshan Ara from Pakistan, right? And what kind of students do you teach? In which field, I mean? Do you teach ESP students? No, only Dr. Nahid. She mentioned here only for teaching general vocabulary. Wow. So I highly recommend you to use word wall in order to teach terminology through scaffolding and using visual elements, right? Vocabulary only. Well, so here I'm going to mention about the structure of the communicative competence. And there are three components of the professional communicative competence. So first one is cognitive, second is the interactive, and the third one is perceptive. It means, first of all, they have to know the meaning of the word. The second, they have to interact with their peers in order to know and then get the meaning of the words. And then they have to use terminology in their monologue or in their dialogue. So I'm going to show you some samples. Actually, I teach biology, chemistry, and then geography students. Most of the cases, I have this more than 7-year experience of teaching ESP students, and their majors are biology, special pedagogy, and chemistry, geography, law, legal students, and some of them are that like a philology students as well. So I'm going to show you that some extracts of my that word wall games. So that I'm going to show you some examples from my law legal students activities. So can you see? I guess. No, you cannot. Yeah, here you can see, right? So in order to teach vocabulary, we have to use the different ways or the different methods or the different types of interactive activities, right? Most of you that have used the word wall in order to teach the words and general words like using that live communication. But I'm going to show you some examples of teaching terminology, such as for legal students here, that I'm going to show you some examples from word wall. As you can see that flip tiles is the best interactive activity for teaching terminology to students. You have to show them, first you have to show them some terminology. They have to guess the meaning. If they don't know, that you have to give some definition. After giving the definition, they have to play this game. The flip tiles. Have you ever used this activity? Flip tiles. Do you use this interactive activity while teaching terminology? How do you teach terminology? Never. Okay. Well, it's a good interactive activity to teach terminology. First, you have to show, you can show that the word, or that you can show some pictures of it, and you can give some definitions, and then they have to match that. If you want to, you can make them match the meaning with their the words or the terminology, or that you have to just give terminology and then give some definition of them. In the Quizlet, you can check their knowledge about the knowledge of terminology. In this game, that you can just it's the best tool to teach vocabulary. First, you have to teach them by using flip tiles. Yes, thank you, David Warman. You shared this. My activity to my law students. So you can use this one. If you wanted, you can just click the link which David Warman shared, and then you can see the different types of the interactive activities for teaching terminologies. First, you have to teach that they have to make them play that flip tiles, and then that match up, and matching pairs. They have to match the pairs, and then finding the match. On the finding match interactive activity, there is given one word and then different types, that one explanation or that one definition, and then some terminology. They have to match the terminology to the definition. For example, Who can answer to this question? Legal responsibility. Which terminology match here? Who can answer? Yes, you can. Can you replace definition with pictures? Right. Yes, you can use. If you want, you can use pictures and then terminology and then picture and then definition. Terminology with examples. Yes. Obligation. Right. Yeah. Right. Thank you. And then you can make them solve the crossword. The next one, the crossword. On the crossword, there is given and there are given some definition of the terminology. According to the meaning of the definition, they have to find out terminology and then they have to fill in the blanks. The next interactive activity is quiz. On this quiz, you can give some definition of the terminology, and then there are given 4 different terminology. They have to find out according to the meaning of the definition. Okay, well, who can answer to this question? The action of trying to prove the case in a court or of law. Okay, do you have answer? The whole word or letter? Whole word. Okay, duty or responsibility. What about duty and responsibility? Court trial. Duty or responsibility? Obligation again, right? So that even you can make your students to play game show quiz. It's a kind of the game. It's so interesting for them. If you make, you can divide your students into several the groups, and then with the help with their group members, they can play the game, play this show quiz, and then even that you can see their result. Obligation. Thank you. After playing the games or the game show, that they can see their result and then their rank and which rank they are staying. It gives more motivation for them to learn more words, unconscious way that they can learn the terminology without any kind of difficulties, because most of them are eager to play the games or that interact with their with the mobile phones during the lesson. As we know, that's why that I always use my students to teach terminology with the help of the word wall. The next interactive activities is the random wheel. They have to just spin the wheel to see that which item comes up first. When they spin the wheels, they can see that one word Motivation is essential to teach terminology. What else can you teach except words? You can teach the collocations. Majid Bulidi, right? Except words, except terminology, we can teach collocations as well. You can give the collocations with their definition, or that you can give the collocation with pictures, or that the picture that can show, that can give the meaning of the words, or the words or the collocations. Thank you, Mahmoud. So the next one is a random wheel. On the random wheel, have to show, they have to just spin the wheel, and when the spin shows one definition. Yes, one definition. They have to read the definition, and then they have to find out terminology. And the next game is airplane. It's a kind of the game. They have to use touch or the keyboard to fly into the correct answer, and then avoid the wrong ones. It shows that the definition, and then according to the definition, they have to touch or the keyboard to fly into the correct answer. No, there is no time. As you can see, it's a kind of airplane game. On this game, here as you can see that airplane, yes, court trial or that obligation. At the bottom part that you can see the words that you have to find out definition or the terminology. The next one is anagram. Anagram, as you can see, as you know, that anagram gives students to make them remember the words, and then make them not to make spelling mistakes. On this interactive activity, they just read the definition. According to the definition, they have to find out, and they have to put the correct order of the word, correct letter of the word. A duty or responsibility, that here that they have to write down obligation. It means that the last obligation, they have to put the correct order of the letter in order to make, in order to show the word obligation. So the useful side of the word wall in teaching or the developing communicative competence or teaching vocabulary, the word wall the copes with the vocabulary challenges independently, and it also shows they demonstrate their own competence and ingenuity, and then boosts learners' confidence, and then motivation as well. If our learners have got, or the students that have got enough motivation, they can learn the terminology, or they can get the knowledge easily. So I guess that you know how to sign in the word wall. Just in case, I'm just giving the link how to use the word wall. If you don't use, if you have never used this tool before, can we apply the same to undergraduate students? Yes, we can use these apps appropriate for young learners. Yes, you can use for young learners, and you can use ESP students as well. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Thank you. Alternative tool for this game is Kahoot. Also good to check the knowledge of students' vocabulary. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, quizzes as well. Thanks a lot. If you have any if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask, or that you can just write your question on my email. والبرمة حاضر. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Doctor. That was a great presentation. Any more questions? I think they're done. All right. And now we'll go to the keynote speaker. So just go to that link. Thank you all.